A charming and spirited young mother.
Oh, she was so vivacious, like a little firecracker. She was sweet and loving, but she just didn't take any crap off anybody.
Is found strangled in her bedroom.
Whoever did this left her there with no chance to survive.
Police face a challenging crime scene.
There was no forensic evidence whatsoever. No fingerprints, no eyewitnesses.
This case was a definite whodunit case.
And a long list of suspects.
He had been hanging around her desk, and he had made some comments that really creeped her out.
She had had some troubled boyfriends in the past.
He didn't want to accept the fact that they were done. Their relationship was over.
You would think that whoever did it had a score to settle.
Until one big break reveals a culprit.
That one key piece of evidence was the aha moment in the case.
And it shocks everyone.
When they finally discovered who it was just surreal.
There's no rhyme, there's no reason behind it. It was absolutely senseless.
Just before 5 p.m. on a Monday in March of 1999, in the small bedroom community of Norcross, Georgia, police raced through the suburban streets in response to a 911 call.
The only information that we had at hand initially was there had been a person discovered dead in an apartment. It was her fiance that had called 911. When we arrived at the scene, we spoke with the fiance briefly.
The man tells detectives the victim is 20-year-old mother of one, Danielle Jennings. Her 2-year-old son is currently at daycare.
The fiance told us he walked in and found her lying on the bed, and he stated that she was cold and blue.
She was deceased by that point. She was face down on the bed, and he rolled her over and then called 911.
While Danielle's fiance is taken to provide a statement, investigators take a close look at the crime scene.
When you went back into the bedroom, she was on the bed, fully clothed, laying on her back, but you could obviously see signs of strangulation.
She had a ligature around her neck. The ligature appeared to be some type of stocking, and it was tied around her neck very, very tight.
It had been tied off to leave it that way. It's not like it released, which I thought was pretty unusual. I mean, whoever did this left her there with no chance to survive.
The ligature was knotted in the back, which would tell you that the person was on her back, behind her when she was strangled.
Detectives explore the rest of the crime scene, looking for clues.
The bed was messed up. One of the dresser drawers was open. The stocking that she was strangled with may have been one of hers out of that drawer. Her purse was dumped out as if somebody had dumped the contents and rummaged through it. It could have been a robbery or a burglary just gone wrong. However, there was other stuff such as cameras, miscellaneous jewelry that could have been taken, but they were not taken.
It was possibly a burglary that had been interrupted, but you always have to consider the possibility that it could have been a staged burglary because, frankly, there really wasn't a lot of disruption.
Next, investigators try to determine how the killer entered the apartment.
There was absolutely no tool marks or anything on the front door, and then there was a sliding patio glass door. It was locked. There was no evidence of tampering with it at all. We went around and we searched the outside, but we didn't turn up anything of any value.
Before they return to the station to interview Danielle's fiance, detectives fan out to speak with other tenants in the complex.
Most of the people in these complexes work during the day, and so most of them are not home. We left our business cards with a note asking them to please give us a call.
As the crime scene investigation continues, news of Danielle's violent murder quickly spreads to her family and friends.
When I found out that Danielle died, I said, no, you've got to be kidding me. I said, this this cannot be real. And then I dropped the phone and I just started screaming. I was just absolutely in utter shock. How does one handle the information that your best friend, your sister, the person that you basically love more than anybody in this world is gone? Why would somebody do this to such a loving, caring, beautiful person?
Born in Columbia, South Carolina in 1978, Danielle grew up with her mother and stepfather in Stockton, Georgia. Even in her youth, Danielle had a magnetic personality.
She was beautiful, strong, tenacious, ferocious. She was very fun. Danielle was always ready to have a good time, to laugh.
Oh, she was so vivacious, like a little firecracker. She was very tiny, but she had this big attitude. She was sweet and loving, but she just didn't take any crap off anybody.
Danielle showed her resilience when she was left to deal with an unplanned pregnancy alone at the age of 16.
There was never a doubt in her mind that she wanted to have that baby. She wasn't scared. I mean, she had brass balls of steel.
She wasn't going to let her age stand in the way of being a good mother.
Danielle gave birth to her son, Tristan, in 1996.
She was so proud. I could see her little attitude in him.
The new mother longed for her son to have a father and hoped she had found one when she started dating Luis Payano.
We grew up with Luis, so we go way back with him. We met Luis in our early teen years. Danielle was always partial to Luis, and Luis and Danielle were dating, and I was so thrilled. And the way that Luis would look at Danielle, like she would walk into the room and he would just light up.
Soon, the couple moved into an apartment together, and Danielle landed an office job at a landscaping company.
She was so excited to have like what we titled a big girl job. She was very proud of herself. We were all very proud of her, you know? She was going places.
In December of 1998, Luis asked Danielle to marry him.
She was so excited, and I'm like, this is gonna be the best marriage ever. When Danielle first got her engagement ring, it was too big. And I said, girl, you gotta get it sized. She's like, I don't wanna take it off. It was beautiful.
Danielle had everything going for her. She had a great career opportunity ahead of her. She had a man she was so excited to marry. She had a beautiful son that just meant the world to her. Danielle was really on top of her game.
She was probably the happiest I had ever seen her.
Now, all Danielle's happiness and hope has been stolen by a cold-blooded killer.
I could not even begin to fathom why somebody would do that to her.
Back at the crime scene, investigators are searching for answers.
The scene raised several questions. Of course, the most obvious was, how did whoever it was get into the apartment? Because there was no sign of forced entry. Was it someone she knew? We know, working off the percentages, that the person most likely to kill you is laying next to you in the bed. In this case, Danielle's fiance, Luis.
Coming up, detectives unearth dark secrets.
She had had some troubled boyfriends in the past.
He was violent. He was abusive. You could tell when he talked about Danielle that it made him mad.
He was just very, very creepy to me. And I know they had tumultuous fights.
The person that did it could have been amongst us.
And just as the case threatens to turn cold,
We felt like we had hit a brick wall.
I had a huge fear that whoever it was got away with it.
a stunning revelation points to a killer no one suspected.
The killer was much closer to home than anybody first thought. I don't think anybody saw it coming.
The murder of 20-year-old mother Danielle Jennings have their first suspect, her fiance, 25-year-old Luis Payano.
Even though he's her fiance, everybody remains a suspect in until such time that we solved the crime.
Investigators question the distraught young man.
He was very emotional, but romance can raise anger to a level sometimes that leads to homicide.
Detectives begin their interview by asking Luis about Danielle's movements the day of her murder.
He stated that he had been at work all day. The last time he had seen Danielle was when he left to go to work.
According to Luis, they had both left the apartment at 6:45 a.m., but Danielle went back into the building to get something. He tells detectives that Danielle seemed distracted because of an upcoming work meeting.
She was supposed to be having a meeting with management that day. She didn't feel easy about it.
Luis says Danielle called him at work around 11:30 a.m.
She wanted to see if Luis would have lunch with her, but he was tied up at work and he couldn't break free.
They didn't have lunch, and later in the afternoon, he couldn't reach her.
He called her at work, and then they told him that she had gone home at lunchtime, but she didn't come back from lunch after a couple of hours.
Luis tells investigators he called Danielle's cell phone and their apartment.
He stated that he was trying to get hold of Danielle and was not getting a response, and then he left work and went home to see if she was there.
Luis said that when he got home, the front door was unlocked, and that really surprised him because they were pretty careful about keeping the front door locked.
Detectives ask Luis about his relationship with Danielle.
We wanted to find out if they had domestic issues. He said that it was a very good relationship and they were very much in love with each other.
To verify his story, detectives call Luis's work and Danielle's loved ones.
Her family and friends stated that they were just a young couple that was very much in love and looking forward to getting married and spending their life together.
She had had some troubled boyfriends in the past, but Luis was on the up and up. I mean, he was setting up a financially stable life for him and Danielle and Tristan, and she loved him so much.
Danielle's friends are adamant that Luis would never harm her, and his alibi seems solid.
We were able to confirm that he had been at work all day through statements of his coworkers. As a result, he was eliminated as a suspect. Now you're on the hunt for other suspects.
With Luis in the clear, detectives ask him if he knew of anyone who may want to harm Danielle.
He brought up the name of Jeff, a co-worker of Danielle. She had filed a sexual harassment complaint against him at work. That piqued our interest a little bit. We immediately went to Danielle's place of work and we met with her supervisor and discussed what was going on.
Danielle's supervisor tells detectives about the young mother's harassment complaint against her coworker.
He was a middle-aged man. He worked at the same landscape company. He had a different job. He was in management. Danielle told her manager and supervisor he had been hanging around her desk and he had made some comments that really kind of creeped her out and acting inappropriately at work.
There was a big age difference between Danielle and Jeff. He was 40, she was 20. He had asked her out for lunch, and she told him that she had a fiance that she loved, and he had made a comment to her that if he was 20 years younger, things would be a lot different.
Danielle had briefly touched base with me about the situation that she was having at work. Dude was kind of crushing on her, and she was trying to get that, under control. But I said, just don't let it get out of hand.
She filed the complaint. I kind of admired her grit. She wasn't going to take it. The company was very responsive to her complaint. They took it seriously. They moved quickly.
Detectives note the timing when told of the company's response.
That day that Danielle was killed, she was supposed to be having a meeting with upper management about the sexual harassment charge.
Once we realized that the meeting had taken place that day, that was something that was suspicious.
Talking with the management, we found out Danielle was anxious and nervous about the meeting.
She was a relatively new employee when she made the complaint. That was one of the reasons she was so nervous, because his career was in a certain amount of jeopardy.
Coworkers state that after the meeting, Danielle went home for lunch, but never returned.
She didn't come back, and we knew that was consistent with the time of death. You had to think, where was the coworker at the time?
Detective suspicions increase when they learn that Jeff was out of the office and did not return until late in the day. Was this too much of a coincidence? Could he have killed Danielle as revenge for her complaint?
We definitely wanted to speak with him face to face.
Detectives hunting the killer of Danielle Jennings suspect a harassment complaint against her coworker, Jeff, may have led to retaliation and murder.
We were now focused on him as a possible suspect. We had to consider the possibility that he followed her home and ambushed her and killed her.
Investigators bring the 40-year-old in for an interview and ask about his interaction with 20-year-old Danielle.
He admitted to asking her out for lunch, but he said other than that, he had not done anything.
He talked about the sexual harassment complaint and pretty typically said, I didn't think it was that big a deal. I didn't know she was that offended.
According to police reports, Jeff denies any sexual intentions toward Danielle.
He told police that whatever lapse in manners that he had had with Danielle, that he liked her. He seemed to be genuinely dismayed to find out what had happened.
Detectives ask if Danielle's complaint gave him a reason to want to harm her.
His first reaction was he was angry. He was adamant that he was not a suspect. And then he said it couldn't have been me because my truck was broken and I was on a job with somebody else, with a coworker, and I can prove it.
Jeff provides investigators with the name of the coworker he claims to have been with.
We immediately ran down his coworker at like 1 o'clock in the morning. This guy verified that he was with him all day till the close of business, that they were together.
With his alibi confirmed, police eliminate Jeff as a suspect. 24 hours after Danielle's murder, the enormity of her death is only just starting to hit home for Danielle's loved ones.
Things like that didn't happen where we grew up. I could not believe somebody would do that to her. It was just the most nightmarish thing I could imagine. It made me question God. Why would you let something that horrible happen to her?
I didn't want to accept it. I couldn't sleep. I just kept saying, she's dead, she's dead. Danielle should not be dead.
The following day, investigators receive the autopsy report and scour it for anything that might point to Danielle's killer.
The manner of death was asphyxiation or strangulation.
The medical examiner stated that she probably lost consciousness within about 15 to 20 seconds after the ligature was placed around her neck.
It seemed clear that she had been surprised by her attacker, had no time to move, had no time to strike back.
It's almost like it came out of nowhere. We knew from the positioning of the knot, someone had come up behind her with the nylon stocking, pulled it tight until she lost consciousness, and then tied it off to kill her. She had not been sexually assaulted. There weren't any other injuries. There weren't any defensive injuries.
This case was a definite whodunit case. There was no evidence found at the scene that could help us.
There was no forensic evidence whatsoever. No transfer of skin, no fingerprints, nothing a lab could look at.
After striking out with the autopsy, investigators revisit the theory that the homicide was a robbery gone wrong.
We don't live there, so we don't know what's supposed to be there and what's not. We asked the fiance to go back through the apartment with us and tell us what he sees missing. The smallest detail sometimes helps point us into the direction of a suspect, but nothing was missing according to the fiancé. At that point, we had absolutely nothing to go on other than the stalking that she was strangled with.
Detectives ask Luis if he recognizes the stalking.
We wanted to know whether it came from her. It was a tan, knee-high women's stocking, and he said that she never wore anything like that, and we didn't find any in the apartment. Whoever did this brought that with them.
The homicide was brutal, violent, and vicious. It lent itself to a personal motive. You would think that whoever did it had a score to settle.
Louise told us she had had some tumultuous relationships in her past, so we pursued that angle.
Investigators asked Danielle's friends about her previous relationships.
When they first started questioning me, they were asking me a lot of questions about her boyfriends in the past, who I felt might have been able to do it. And then it clicked that, Eddie, he was a tow truck driver and he was a big guy. And he was just very, very creepy to me.
Her best friend told us about her ex-boyfriend. He was violent, he was abusive.
She ended up having to get a restraining order on him. With Eddie, no one ever really knew when he was going to pop up again.
That was somebody we needed to look at.
Friends have alerted investigators to Eddie McElwaney, an ex-boyfriend with a violent history.
We learned a lot about her former boyfriend. We learned that she had begun to see him when she was a teenager, when she was younger.
Friends reveal Danielle started dating Eddie shortly after she became pregnant from another relationship. But Eddie's behavior soon raised red flags.
As they got more serious, he became more possessive and controlling, and he definitely wanted to start isolating her from her friends and family more.
I didn't want to be around him. I did not like the way he made me feel. I didn't like the way he looked at Danielle. I mean, he would sometimes look at her with disgust. And I know they had tumultuous fights.
We learned it had been an abusive relationship, physical and emotional.
I mean, she would stand up to anybody, but as tough and as a badass as she was, I think she was a little bit afraid of him.
Things only got worse with Eddie when Danielle gave birth to her child.
Her family and friends stated that shortly after her son was born, Eddie was getting involved in drugs, and that was finally the straw that broke the camel's back, and she ended the relationship with that.
Danielle moved out and tried to start fresh, but Eddie had other plans.
She knew it was going to be difficult, but she didn't realize that Eddie was not going to leave Danielle in peace. He didn't want to accept the fact that they were done, their relationship was over. She never knew when he would turn up around the corner, when she just wanted to be left alone.
She had gotten a restraining order against Eddie because he had been stalking her. He had been driving back and forth in front of her house. He had gone to her work, and she was in fear that she was in danger.
We found out that he had violated the restraining order several times. He would call her, leave voicemails for her. He would drive by her house several times a day or night.
When police ask when Eddie last contacted Danielle, the answer is troubling.
Danielle's family had told us that within the last few months, he had been calling her, trying to get her to talk to him, but she would just hang up on him.
Could Eddie have shown up at Danielle's apartment the day she was killed, leading to a deadly confrontation?
I've seen a lot of domestic abuse cases, so I knew that there was a possibility that with his past, that he could have done something like that.
Investigators track down Eddie and bring him in for questioning.
In the interview with Eddie, he was kind of belligerent and unhappy to be there and a little bit hostile. You could tell when he talked about Danielle that it made him mad. What we saw with Eddie certainly had all the earmarks of a domestic violence case.
When questioned about his relationship with Danielle, Eddie's responses raised detectives' suspicions even more.
When he was asked about the relationship, his version was a little bit different. He never mentioned any abuse. He thought everything was great.
We asked him when was the last time that he had had any contact with Danielle, and he said that he had not talked to her for at least a year or longer. We know that he's lying about that. From speaking with Danielle's family and friends, we knew in the last several months he had been calling her.
At that point, he's looking pretty good. So you have to determine where he was at the time of the crime.
Eddie tells detectives that he was working many miles away from where Danielle was killed.
He said that on his job as a tow truck driver that he had to go out of state.
Investigators immediately look into Eddie's alibi.
His boss verified that he was out of state, and he was able to produce hotel receipts, gas receipts that showed that he was actually out of state at the time of the crime.
Whenever he responded to a legitimate call, he had to log it, and his whereabouts could be verified throughout the day.
That is a pretty tight alibi, so he was eliminated as a suspect.
It's another dead end for detectives.
Once again, we're knocked for a loop and we're back to ground zero, and he moves down the line and we're looking for somebody else.
It was infuriating. It was frustrating. I had a huge fear that whoever it was got away with it, because people get away with murder every day. I was really hoping that the detectives would find something, because you're sitting here trying to point a finger at somebody that you don't know who.
There was this air of suspense around everything because we didn't know at that time who had killed Danielle. The person that did it could have been amongst us.
We had basically eliminated everybody who was close to the victim. When you get to that point of an investigation, you don't have anywhere else to logically follow up.
With no more leads, the investigation is at a standstill.
We felt like we had hit a brick wall, and then we got a call that changed everything.
Days after finding Danielle Jennings strangled in her apartment bedroom, police hunting her killer have just got a stunning new lead.
We received a phone call from a Miss Kirk that resided at the apartment complex.
The woman tells detectives about a disturbing incident that took place a week before Danielle was killed.
She was awakened one morning by someone knocking at the door, and she looked out the peephole but didn't see anybody there, so she went back to bed. And a few minutes later, she hears the front door open, and the maintenance man is standing there. The maintenance man says that he's there for a work order. However, Miss Kirk said she felt very uncomfortable the entire time that he was in there because he was always staring at her, like he was more preoccupied with her than he was completing the work order.
The woman cannot provide the name of the maintenance man, but she gives a description to police. Detectives head back to Danielle's apartment complex to investigate.
While speaking with the management at the complex, we found that there was another case similar in the past from a Miss Bruno that lived in the apartment complex.
Management told the detectives that someone had walked into this woman's apartment. She had, of course, asked him who the heck he was. "What are you doing in my apartment?" And he said maintenance, and claimed that he was there to change light bulbs. And she said, "I don't have any light bulbs to change." He kind of mumbled and stumbled, and then, maybe I have the wrong apartment, and he backed out and left. It was so similar to the other one, which of course raises our eyebrows.
The complex was big enough so that there were several maintenance workers, but only one closely fit the description given by the young ladies. That would be Calvin Oliver.
We showed a photograph of Mr. Oliver to Miss Bruno and Miss Kirk, and both of them identified him as the person that had walked in on them.
Investigators discover a disturbing trend emerged after Calvin had been hired 7 months ago.
Come to find out, there had been several burglaries reported where items had been stolen out of apartments that had no forced entry.
Could Calvin have been responsible for these thefts?
We learned that he had an apartment in the complex. The fact that he lives there makes it so accessible that he could walk around, not be suspicious. We also learned that the custodians had access to the master keys of every apartment. He has complete access.
Detectives search for any link between Danielle and Calvin.
We found out that he had done a work order in her apartment a couple of weeks prior to the murder.
That is somebody that you really want to look at. It went back to our original theory of if this was a burglary, then it had been interrupted. He could have known that Danielle Jennings was gone during the daytime, and he decided that day that he was going to enter that apartment.
Investigators haul Calvin Oliver in for an interview, but make the call to slow play their suspicions.
When Oliver was brought in for questioning, we didn't want to tip him off to anything about the homicide. So he was interviewed initially about the burglaries. He absolutely denied any of that. He said, I didn't steal anything, I didn't go into apartments. He denied any involvement in any burglaries.
The 42-year-old tells detectives that his intrusion on the two women in the complex was a simple misunderstanding.
Once we got around to interviewing him about the murder, the first question was, did you hear about this? It was kind of odd. You would have thought that a person who worked in that apartment complex and was there every day would have heard everything about it. He went, yeah, I think I heard something about it. I don't know much about it. I don't know that woman.
He insisted he knew nothing about, as he described her, that dead girl.
All he admitted to knowing her was that he had done the work order in her apartment.
At that point, we had a pattern of conduct going into apartments. We had the admission that he had been in the apartment, but we had nothing that directly linked him to the murder.
With nothing concrete on Calvin, detectives end the interview. But before they let him walk free, police run a background check and are shocked by what they find.
He had a criminal history of burglary and theft. There was an outstanding warrant on him for failure to appear on a burglary charge in another jurisdiction. That day that Danielle was killed, if he's in there and she walks in on him, that would be a reason for him to cause her harm because he doesn't want to go back to prison.
He had an outstanding warrant, so he was held for that, and that bought them enough time while they investigated.
Based on the burglaries that had occurred in the complex, we obtained a search warrant for his apartment. We're trying to see if we can find anything that would tie him to Danielle Jennings. We're looking for any type of the stockings or pantyhose or anything that would be similar to the one that we found tied around her neck.
Detectives find no matching stocking, but they do discover incriminating evidence.
We do find evidence of the other burglaries that had been committed in the complex. And then we also found out that he had possession of a master key for the apartment complex so that he could open any door on any building at any time, and he was not supposed to be in possession of that key.
It's only enough evidence to allow investigators to charge Calvin with burglary.
We concluded that search with those items, but nothing was found relevant to the murder. You really don't have anywhere else to go at that point.
We don't have a stocking, we don't have anything that ties him to Danielle or her apartment at all.
That's where we were until Luis called. Out of the blue, he said, do you have the engagement ring?
We told him, no, we don't have a ring. We didn't know one was missing. And then he describes the ring, and then the big bright light goes off. When we were doing the search on Oliver's apartment, we noticed a ring on a dresser in his bedroom, but the ring didn't match any of the items stolen, so we really didn't have a reason to seize it at that time. We do another search warrant, go back into the apartment, we seize that ring, we show it to the fiance. He can't positively identify the ring, but he says her best friend will definitely be able to identify it. If we were able to identify that as being Danielle's ring, that would physically tie Oliver to Danielle and her apartment on the day that she was murdered.
With the entire investigation on the line, detectives race to the home of Danielle's best friend.
Is that ring the engagement ring?
We had that ring, then we had the killer.
Detectives have seized a ring from suspect Calvin Oliver's apartment. But is it Danielle's engagement ring? They hope her best friend can answer that question.
The detective and Lewis were there, and I said, well, what's going on? And the detective looked at me and he said, Leslie, he said, do you know what Danielle's engagement ring looked like? And I said, yes, sir, I do. The detective said, is there any defining characteristics to this ring? He goes, and I need you to be specific. And I said, yes, sir. I said it was bent. She had bent the band so it stayed snug on her finger because she wouldn't take the dang thing to get sized.
We needed to find out when was the last time she had seen her wearing the ring.
I said, I saw Danielle the Sunday before she was killed, and she had a ring on Sunday night. And he takes the evidence bag out and he says, is this her ring? And the minute I saw it, I knew it was hers.
When we had that ring and had it identified as being hers, we knew that we had the guy. We knew we had the right person.
Finding the ring was the aha moment in the case. And that was the piece of evidence that allowed us to charge Calvin Oliver with murder.
9 days after her death, Calvin Oliver is arrested for the murder of Danielle Jennings.
The primary charge was malice murder, and that means that you intentionally and unlawfully kill another human being.
Detectives once again interview Calvin, this time taking a different approach.
Once you have a suspect under arrest for the charge that you're interviewing him about, then the interview becomes very direct. He was given a chance again to tell the story where he denied any involvement in the murder, and then he was confronted with the evidence that we had.
We told him about the ring, and that's when he said, well, I stole that ring 2 weeks ago when I did the work order in her apartment. But see, we knew that was a lie because we had people that had seen her wearing the ring, so we knew that he was lying about that.
Calvin refuses to answer any more questions.
We told him that he was being charged with malice murder because you took the pantyhose with you into the apartment because you had intent to harm someone, and he said there was no intent there, which was a good comment to have in a statement. It's like he admitted to killing her without knowing that he had admitted to it. We were convinced 100% that we had our guy. This is the guy that was responsible for the death of Danielle Jennings, and that we were going to send him to prison for the rest of his life.
News of an arrest in Danielle's murder brings relief to her loved ones and surprise.
When they finally discovered who it was, the maintenance man in her apartment building, it was just surreal.
I don't think anybody saw it coming. The killer was much closer to home than anybody first thought.
When I saw his picture, I threw up, knowing that that was the man that strangled my best friend for no reason.
At trial, prosecutors present how they believe the crime unfolded.
The day Danielle was killed, Mr. Oliver had already let himself in, hoping for financial gain. After the HR meeting about her coworker, Danielle went home for lunch by herself. Once she opened the door and stepped in, he knew she was there, and he knew she could not exit again. He was not going to get caught.
He ambushed her from behind with the stocking. He came over her head. He pulled it tight, pushed her down onto the bed until she lost consciousness, and then he tied the ligature off, and there was no way for her to escape. There was no heat of the moment. There was no emotion. He killed Danielle because it made his life easier.
The jury hears about the prosecution's most damning evidence, Danielle's stolen engagement ring.
I had to be the one to testify about the ring because I identified the ring. I actually had to look at that man. I had to sit there and look at him. Calvin Oliver sat there just staring daggers into me, is what he did, and tried everything he could to make me feel uncomfortable. And I took a big, deep breath, and I stared right back at him.
There was no explanation for the presence of this ring in Calvin Oliver's apartment, other than he took it off Danielle Jennings' dead finger.
On October 13th, 2000, after a 5-day trial, the jury delivers their verdict.
He was found guilty on all charges.
The judge sentences Calvin Oliver to life in prison.
When the verdict came through, we were all holding hands. We just knew justice had been served as far as it could be. I mean, we were glad, but it still wasn't going to bring her back. Her mom was never the same again.
So you got what I need?
On the streets of New Orleans,
All right.
drug money bought the city's cops.
Good.
Officers became the strong arm of drug lords, brutalizing anyone who dared speak out.
Kim, help!
With police tainted by greed, undercover agents would have to put their lives on the line to bring down the corrupt officers who hid behind a shattered shield.
In a city awash in narcotics, the drug lords have all the power, even over the police. Corruption in New Orleans grew like cancer, eating away at public safety and threatening to destroy the city. Lured by easy wealth, crooked cops began breaking the laws they were sworn to uphold. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. When it became clear that the police could no longer police themselves, the FBI had to get involved. It was a case where the line between friends and enemies became dangerously blurred.
New Orleans, 1993. Tourists packed the city looking for a good time, not all of it legal. Cocaine was in demand, and the dealers cashed in. It was a violent business. For protection, the drug lords turned to those whose duty was to serve and protect. The cops. Officers lined their pockets while enforcing the will of the dealers. They controlled turf like thugs, terrorizing innocent civilians. Agent Stan Haddon of the FBI's Public Corruption Unit in New Orleans was aware of the growing problem.
Our intelligence told us that there was a great variety of corruption taking place among many different officers on the department. However, the one thing that seemed to be the most pervasive was that officers were out there working with drug dealers on the street, were protecting drug dealers on the street, and were stealing money and drugs from drug dealers on the street.
One such drug dealer was Terry Adams, known on the streets as Scaboo. He was a small-time operator who was being extorted by Officer Sammy Williams.
So you got what I need? Come on now, give me what I need.
But this time, the protection money Scaboo paid Williams wasn't enough. On Christmas Eve, the officer demanded that Scaboo pay him $10,000 cash by 6 p.m. If Scaboo failed to show, Williams threatened to beat him and guaranteed him 20 years to life. That evening, at 5 p.m., Special Agent Stan Haddon was finishing up some last-minute work. About to go home, he took one last call. It was Scaboo. His time was running out. He told Haddon that he was being blackmailed, but didn't have the $10,000 the corrupt cop was demanding in less than an hour.
What are the name of the officers?
When Scaboo contacted me, we realized that that was our best chance to do something about police corruption. And I immediately arranged to meet him and debrief him in person. There was no way we could get everything together by 6 o'clock. By the time I met with him, it was 30 minutes before the deadline.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about that.
Haddon and his partner quickly hashed out a plan.
This is, I think, the best one we've got.
Scaboo would meet the officer as arranged, but he'd be wearing an FBI wire. The agents couldn't arrange $10,000 on such short notice. Scaboo would have to convince the cop to accept smaller payments over several meetings.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, they could be rough. Well, you know that. You worked with them.
Yeah, I have.
Assured by Haddon that he would be under constant surveillance, Scaboo took his position. Officer Sammy Williams was still on duty when he arrived with a prisoner cuffed in the back seat of his cruiser. Williams drove Scaboo to a deserted spot behind a seafood market. He ordered him to throw the $10,000 into the trunk. Scaboo told Williams he only had $3,000 now, but would pay the rest later. If the cop arrested Scaboo, he'd never get his payoff. Agents hoped Williams would agree to meet him again for more of the money. He did, and the FBI had it all on tape. Haddon believed this one incident could lay the groundwork for exposing more corruption in the New Orleans Police Department.
Our main objective was to try and create a strategy that would enable us to prosecute as many bad officers as we possibly could.
In the days that followed, agents, along with prosecutors from the United States Attorney's Office, began to plan their operation, codenamed Shattered Shield. Assistant U.S. Attorney Al Winters would advise agents every step of the way on what would be needed to convict the dirty cops.
We were involved really from day one. We met with the case agents on numerous occasions and discussed exactly what we were interested in being developed as far as evidence in the case.
As with most corruption cases, the FBI's strongest evidence would likely come from wiretaps. According to Special Agent Karen Jenkins, an FBI wiretap specialist, securing them isn't easy.
Title III is a court-authorized intercept or wiretap. It's very difficult to get one approved. It's a lengthy process, very time-consuming. Basically, we have to have approval by FBI officials to get one, and beyond that, we have to have the review and approval by Department of Justice officials. Finally, a federal judge will make the final determination as to whether or not one is authorized.
After delivering 2 more payoffs to Officer Williams, Scaboo had won his trust. Now the FBI seized the opportunity to take the operation to the next phase. Scaboo would approach Williams with a proposition. The volume of drug business was going to increase, and Scaboo would need more cops to protect it.
Perhaps we can bring in an agent.
If Williams was interested in higher payoffs, he would need to hire more dirty cops to handle the expansion. Williams took the bait. Scaboo met with him for another recorded payoff in mid-January 1994.
Don't forget now.
But this time, Williams showed up with another officer. He turned out to be Len Davis, Sammy Williams' partner.
Don't forget now, man.
It wasn't surprising. Davis was known in the projects as a gangster with a badge.
It's not very good. See if you can make it.
Reviewing the tapes, hadn't discovered a problem.
What are we listening to?
Both Davis and Williams used the coded language of the drug trade. To make charges stick, the FBI had to record the officers using language that a jury would understand. Hadden pressed Scaboo to get Williams and Davis to use words like dope so there'd be no doubt at trial. But when Scaboo told the cops the dope is in, Davis suspected something was up.
If you're in the police business and somebody starts using words that are that overt and that plain, that immediately makes you suspicious that this person is trying to set you up.
Davis shoved Scaboo into the car and told Williams to drive. The agents would be too conspicuous on the deserted streets. If they pursued the cops now, they would put Scaboo's life at greater risk. The only thing they could do was sit patiently and listen to the wire. When the car came to a stop, Davis's rage ignited. He yelled that Scaboo was never to say the word dope again.
They immediately took him to a deserted location, aggressively searched him. You can hear the Velcro ripping loose on his clothes and stuff. And that was a very tense moment.
Davis insisted that he wouldn't go to jail for careless talk. He and Williams stripped Scaboo looking for a wire. Scaboo was sure he was going to die. Miraculously, they never found him.
He's clean. He's clean. He's clean. I'm not going to jail behind you.
Their trust was restored.
You understand me?
Scaboo continued his protection deal with Davis and Williams. For the next job, the cops drove him to a store where a drop-off was to take place. Inside, Scaboo checked a bag at the counter. He passed the ticket to an agent posing as a buyer, who then retrieved the bag. Williams and Davis watched as each transaction went down. They were promised $1,000 for every kilo of cocaine they protected. For them, the deals meant easy money. Davis and Williams met Scaboo behind stores and alleyways for the protection payoffs. The FBI recorded every word. Gradually, Operation Shattered Shield was building a solid case against police corruption. The recordings continued into the spring of 1994. Once agents were sure Davis and Williams were solidly on board, the FBI prepared to expand the investigation. With still more cocaine to guard, Williams and Davis would need to recruit more dirty cops. Federal agents hoped to snare every one of them. But agents knew the officers may become suspicious of Scaboo's rapidly growing drug business. They needed to bring in a big-time dealer, someone whose status as a kingpin would explain the larger shipments.
You like some? Sure. Okay.
Haddon called on Juan
What we're doing
Jackson,
down here is,
an FBI agent trained
bringing in
specifically
JJ
for working
here
undercover.
to represent a drug kingpin from up in the East Coast.
At that time, I was in New York City, and I'd been contacted to come down to just be interviewed and go over the actual case. A lot of times, they'll be looking for a certain person, height, weight, color, or whatever, to infiltrate or get into a certain group.
Known as JJ, the agent would act as Scaboo's cocaine supplier, proposing to use New Orleans as a hub to store and distribute his product nationwide.
I was a high-level drug dealer. I played that role, and I had ties where my operation was in both Miami and in New York City.
With the arrival of JJ, Shattered Shield was about to grow from a minor drug business to a booming enterprise. Jackson was one of the FBI's best undercover agents. He was smart and experienced. But his life would be in the hands of the informant, Scaboo, who had no training. Jackson needed to build complete trust with Scaboo, or they'd both be dead.
The informant, because he lives that world, is probably for me anyway, the most important, because he himself has been there. He's been around these people. If he's not believable, it's not going to work. And I think that was the big thing for me down there, was to make sure that we were going to be believable.
Jackson and Scaboo rehearsed their roles again and again, preparing for the real test with Davis and Williams. Jackson, federal agent from the north, and Scaboo, a southerner who had dealt drugs all his life, had to forge a common history. Their story would be that they had met in the Army. After their stint was up, they'd kept in touch. They hashed and rehashed details of their friendship, habits, fake memories that they'd have to know cold, and when to say them. They were dealing with criminals who could run thorough background checks and who were free to use deadly force.
We knew that whatever we had to keep it simple, but we had to make sure that we remembered certain things. The biggest thing I thought that helped us was my initials, my nickname. So no matter how many times they would ask him, what's his name? He believably said, because he only knew, JJ.
In April, the FBI was ready to introduce JJ into the operation. He arrived at a hotel carrying what was supposed to be a drug payment of $100,000. For the first time, Williams and Davis caught a glimpse of the big-time dealer. Their perceptions would be critical.
The first encounter was in the Sheraton Hotel. They were going to stand at a distance and just observe. It was another test to see if they were willing to do what they were going to do. Hey, I don't know how it's going to work. They could arrest me right now and take me off and, I'm down. Because it was supposed to be drug money. So it was a test.
Scaboo told the cops about JJ and his plan to use New Orleans as a transport hub for his cocaine business. Davis and Williams carefully studied JJ's every move. Jackson was creating his character before their eyes. It would become his full-time identity, and it would have to hold up under scrutiny. Everything depended on what the cops thought they had seen, and if they believed the cash exchange was genuine. The plan worked. The cops were convinced that JJ was the real deal. The FBI was now poised to take Operation Shattered Shield to the next level. By the spring of 1994, the FBI's Operation Shattered Shield, targeting New Orleans police officers involved in the city's drug trade, was in place. Posing as a drug kingpin named JJ, undercover special agent Juan Jackson worked with Scaboo, the drug dealer turned FBI informant. Scaboo rented a hotel room for JJ to meet officers Len Davis and Sammy Williams for the first time.
What's up, man? What's up?
That was showtime. That was a big deal. On any first meeting with any bad guys, you know, a million things are going through your mind. I mean, are you going to be believable? Is anything going to happen that's going to change their attitude? It's either going to work from here or we're all going to go home.
Playing the street-savvy drug dealer, JJ insisted that everyone strip to establish trust.
Sure.
For this first meeting, Jackson didn't wear a wire. He didn't need to. The room had been thoroughly wired by the FBI for audio and video recording. Then, in a bold gamble, JJ invited them to search the room. Because they were cops, Davis and Williams knew how to find a room wire. But JJ bet his life on the FBI's technicians. The cops never found the wires. JJ was beginning to build trust with the officers. But officers are trained to sniff out deception.
I mean, you got to think that I'm meeting with two police officers. Because of the guns, you also always have to remember the threat. You always have to be conscious of the threat and remember exactly where they are and what they're going to do and where the weapons are.
With the cops convinced for the moment, JJ began to discuss the proposal approved by case agent Stan Haddon.
And he played the role of a big-time drug dealer from New York who was using New Orleans as a transshipment point, simply as a storage point, where he could bring dope in, leave it for a while, have it guarded and protected by the officers, and then thereafter have it shipped out to other points unknown.
For their role, JJ promised to pay them $5,000 every day the cops guarded the warehouse. Williams and Davis were enthusiastic about the plan, even offering advice. The cops urged JJ to hire young drivers, give them company uniforms with name tags, and put signs on the sides of the trucks to resemble legitimate companies. For the FBI, the meeting was flawless.
The meeting went off without a hitch. They bought JJ's act. They believed him completely, and they also said the magic word cocaine, which got it clearly established on tape that we were talking about the officers protecting a drug operation.
From that May meeting, the plan moved quickly. The FBI found a warehouse that met their needs, far from public view and rival drug dealers. JJ and Scaboo met Davis and Williams for a walkthrough.
JJ and Scaboo would meet with Len Davis and Sammy Williams at the warehouse for what we call the pre-deal meet. There at that meeting, they would discuss when the dope was coming in, how long it was going to stay in town, and how much money JJ was going to pay for the officers to guard the dope.
Once inside, Davis told JJ that he had half a dozen more officers lined up to guard the cocaine shipments. They would work in 10-hour shifts. Uniformed police outside guarding payloads of cocaine inside. Up to $250,000 worth in each load. At that June meeting came the first big payments from JJ. More than $10,000. Everything is going smoothly. But one aspect of the warehouse plan bothered Assistant U.S. Attorney Al Winters.
Basically, what we told the agents, unless we had evidence, irrefutable evidence, that these people knew they were guarding cocaine, we couldn't prosecute it.
Because the cops stood guard outside the warehouse, they could later claim they didn't know that drugs were inside.
I think having some sort of video or photographic
Haddon had to find a way to prove
record
Davis's recruits saw the drug shipments.
Or maybe even see.
His team mulled over ways to bring the drugs into plain view.
We need them to implicate themselves. Here, I'll take those.
The officers would have to be recorded seeing and discussing the shipment. Shipments were delivered to the warehouse one weekend every month according to schedule. Then, in mid-July, the FBI sent a shipment that the guards didn't expect. With one load already in the warehouse, an FBI agent dressed as a courier brought another shipment. The driver shocked the guard cops by unloading the cocaine in plain sight. This was too overt for Len Davis's crew. They didn't want to see drugs at all.
They didn't want the vehicles outside the warehouse unloading drugs and stuff where the officers could actually see it.
Quickly, get down here.
The cops called Sammy Williams on a cell phone JJ had given him. Williams called JJ, and JJ and Scaboo raced to the warehouse. JJ responded like a hot-headed drug dealer.
I was arguing with this guy. I mean, we were actually screaming at each other. What are you doing? Where are you? Whatever. And he's observing this. There's a police officer calling Lynn, telling him all what's going on and how this doesn't look good.
To the cops, this whole drug operation was starting to look dangerously unprofessional. Concerned, the driver made another call. Sammy Williams arrived to straighten out the problem.
Okay. See what I gotta deal with? Leave it. I got it. 5 minutes.
JJ explained it was the driver's screw. He asked that the cops escort the van to the city limits right away. Despite the risk, the episode worked. It showed that the cops knew what was inside the warehouse.
This ain't right. What's going on? Take him to the edge of town, all right?
And it was all videotaped.
Just let him go. Let him go.
But the episode raised doubts for the cops. Either JJ was an amateur, or he was part of a sting. Either way, they'd be watching him more closely now. Shattered Shield wore on into the summer as all of New Orleans baked.
About 100 degrees out here.
In August, guarding the warehouse proved hard duty. The cops complained of the wear and tear on their engines from running the air conditioning all day in the heat. They wanted a vehicle that was more comfortable, that could also endure the long hours, perhaps a van. The officers asked Len Davis to provide one, and Davis brought their request to JJ. For the investigation, it was a huge break. The sweaty cops had just handed the FBI a golden opportunity.
It was a stroke of luck. One day, Lynn approached me and said that the officers were complaining that they're running their cars in air conditioning, and the cars are starting to overheat, they're burning gas, on and on and on. Once we were able to rent the van and put the listening device inside, we were able to hear a lot more conversations.
The FBI quickly filed the paperwork to get court-authorized wiretaps for the van. Technicians carefully installed state-of-the-art microphones. They had to yield top sound quality for months with no maintenance. The van was a perfect Trojan horse for getting inside information.
I picked this out myself.
The shiny new van made the officers suspicious. They wondered if anyone could have tampered with it.
It ain't nothing wrong with it.
They wanted to know exactly where Davis had gotten the vehicle.
I've never seen this vehicle before.
Because JJ had so completely won Davis's trust, Davis told the cops that he himself had rented the van.
Is it all right?
He vouched for it.
It's okay.
That calmed their fears.
I picked it out myself. What do you think?
Len Davis didn't want anyone upsetting his flow of payments.
I picked it
The
out
FBI would soon learn just how ruthlessly Davis guarded his interests. After 3 months of Shattered Shield, more and more New Orleans cops came under the FBI's investigation. Len Davis and undercover agent JJ met often to discuss drug shipments and payoffs for police protection. Davis made frequent threats.
They'll tell you, we run this city. We do whatever we want to do. They let me know that very many times. If they feel like they want to shut it down, they'll shut it down.
But Davis liked the money. JJ knew that as long as the money flowed, he would never shut the operation down. Davis called the shots for the other officers. He recruited and set the schedules using his cell phone. But he complained about his bill. So JJ offered Davis a new cell phone, free of charge. It was one more way the FBI could record the cops' knowing involvement in drug trafficking. The wires the FBI had planted in the warehouse van were paying off. One night, 2 guards on the graveyard shift brought prostitutes to the van. The wires picked up everything, even the cops' sexual indiscretions. When Jenkins heard this, she immediately phoned JJ. The situation was a chance to catch the cops off balance. JJ called Davis to complain and to see what they'd get on tape. He told Davis he had checked out the warehouse and found that the cops weren't protecting it. JJ wasn't paying cops to have sex. He ordered Davis to straighten things out. Davis arrived in a fury. His henchmen were threatening to ruin his whole operation.
Lynn was upset. Lynn was a businessman through and through. Lynn wanted it to work exactly one way. And he was really upset that I was upset. And he got up. He came out there and just kicked everybody out.
JJ's call brought Davis down on him hard that night. But the episode triggered deep suspicions among the dirty cops. They now felt sure that JJ was the problem and believed they could run the operation better themselves. They discussed ways to kill JJ. Their plans alarmed Agent Karen Jenkins.
When I heard those conversations where they were threatening to do harm to our undercover agent, it sent a chill down my spine. It scared me. Before I came to New Orleans, I had worked with JJ in another office, so I knew him personally, and I was very concerned.
Despite the threats to his life, JJ was resolute, keeping the cops engaged with plans to further expand the operation. He promised Davis that the largest shipment would arrive before Christmas. After that, he would move the deliveries to another part of the city. All the time, JJ had to draw out more evidence on tape without making Davis suspicious.
He was very careful. He watched everything. He paid attention to everything I said. There were conversations where we'd talk, and I'd use the word cocaine. He would count the times I used it. And he would tell me, Jay, you said cocaine 5 times. Jay, you said kilos 5 times. So I had to be careful.
At the same time, Haddon and his team had to defuse another plot they overheard. The cops were threatening to kill the couriers and steal the cocaine. The agents scrambled delivery times and mapped new routes to and from the warehouse to keep the cops off balance. With so many dirty cops, the FBI couldn't make a clean sweep from the outside alone. Agents would need someone powerful in the police force to be a strong ally. Despite the danger of leaks, they decided to seek help from within the New Orleans Police Department. October 1994 brought fresh changes to New Orleans in a new police chief, Richard Pennington.
So, how do you like our first?
Pennington was an outsider from Washington, D.C., hired in the hopes of reforming the Crescent City's crooked police force.
Since you're just moving in, actually, why don't you have a seat?
The FBI invited the new chief for a meeting.
News is not all good, fortunately.
Then Haddon introduced JJ. He informed Pennington that Operation Shattered Shield was uncovering corruption deep in the force that he was about to head.
His name is Scaboo.
His cooperation would be critical for the success of Operation Shattered Shield. On the streets of New Orleans, Davis and Williams were still on active duty, cruising their territory. Len Davis had a long list of public complaints against him. During their rounds one night that October, Davis and Sammy Williams patrolled the Desire housing project. Seeing the pair of cops approach, two youths took flight. Williams chased one teenager down, bludgeoned him, and left him bleeding in the street. At that moment, Kim Groves, the victim's aunt, decided that police had terrorized their neighborhood long enough.
Who's gonna pay the bill?
The next day, Groves, a 32-year-old mother of three, filed a complaint against Len Davis and his partner. She cited the pair for police violence. An officer alerted Davis about the complaint.
Do you want to know his name? Officer Davis, do you know him?
Yeah, this is definitely a...
Assistant U.S. Attorney Mike McMahon saw the report.
She reported not only Sammy Williams, who did the actual brutality, but Len Davis as well, who had nothing to do with that pistol whipping. And at that point, Len Davis became enraged.
For Davis, Groves' complaint came at the worst possible time. It would bring unwanted attention just as the new police chief was coming on board.
I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna get her.
Len Davis vowed to get revenge. The same day that Kim Groves filed her complaint, Richard Pennington was sworn in as New Orleans' new chief of police. That marked the start of Shattered Shield's final phase, the shift from an FBI effort to a partnership with a city desperate to clean house. That very night, Agent Jenkins recorded several conversations that would show just how rotten some of the city's men in blue had become. The first call was cryptic. Hours after Pennington was sworn in, Len Davis made a call on his cell phone. He gave an order to an unknown man.
I need you to do a 30 for me.
The FBI taped the conversation, but because Davis spoke in modified police code, agents didn't know what it meant. While they attempted to decipher it, agents recorded a second, more disturbing call. This time, the unknown man called Davis. As they spoke, a police dispatcher announced a murder in the Desire housing project. The victim's name, Kim Groves. When Davis heard the news, he cried, "Rockabye." It was the triumphant cry of a killer. When he later heard it, the call shocked Assistant U.S. Attorney Mike McMahon.
As soon as he confirmed the name of Kim Groves, Davis shut off the radio, and then on the wiretap conversation over the cell phone just exulted in a primal scream of delight that indeed Kim Groves was dead.
When agents reviewed the tapes and checked the phone records, they discovered that the man who spoke to Davis was Paul Hardy. Davis had asked Hardy for a 30, a police code normally used to report a homicide. But that night, Davis used it as an order for the murder of Kim Groves. Canvassing the projects, agents quickly learned that Hardy was a known drug dealer who led a small gang of thugs. With the help of two accomplices, Hardy acted quickly, coldly, and for just $300. As he sped away over a bridge, Hardy threw the barrel of the gun into the canal and handed the body of the gun to an accomplice for safekeeping.
what's up, man?
When the FBI realized Davis's role in the murder, agents grew more concerned for JJ's safety. JJ met with Davis soon afterward. He looked carefully for signs that Davis was anxious or upset.
Yeah, what's up,
He saw
man?
none. The murder of Kim Groves seemed to have relaxed Davis.
Yeah. Look, let me call you back later,
JJ
all right?
still had to play his part, the role of a drug lord. Though uneasy, he was careful not to talk about the murder.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
I wanted to ask a lot of questions about it. I couldn't. The only thing I'd ask him was, is there anything different happening since the last time I was here? He said no. And we went on just like nothing ever happened. Is he a cold-blooded killer? I could probably do you in a minute? Yeah.
Having seen what Davis and his cops could do, JJ had every reason to believe that he could be next. He was unaware that they were already planning ways to kill him. Days after Len Davis ordered the murder of Kim Groves, the FBI learned of more threats by Davis's men. A New Orleans police officer assisting in Operation Shattered Shield received an anonymous threat. It came with Kim Groves' obituary. The message was clear. Death would come to those who talked. That day, Stan Haddon learned of still more threats against JJ and the other agents. Agent Jenkins had recorded 5 cops at the warehouse plotting to kill the couriers and JJ.
Oh, yeah.
Then they would steal the cocaine and sell it themselves. Haddon had no choice. The FBI had to wrap up the operation before it was too late.
Once we realized that the lives of our undercover agents were at serious risk, then we had to react to it. We had to do something.
The FBI needed to move up their plans for the big shipment JJ had promised to Davis. A cocaine shipment so large that it would require a half dozen more cops to guard it. But Haddon needed a location unfamiliar to the cops, a place where the FBI could mobilize quickly. He and his team scouted the Mardi Gras truck stop on Elysian Fields Avenue. The spot had good highway access. It also posed little risk to the public in the event of a shootout. The cocaine would arrive on an 18-wheeler, then be loaded into cars and escorted by the cops out of the city. Every detail had to be mapped out. The plan would require the coordination of 85 agents positioned strategically along the routes. When Davis put out the word about a huge November 18th shipment, he enticed new recruits. As a load of cocaine worth $250,000 arrived, Davis, Williams, and their crew stood ready as protection. Agents posing as drivers moved the shipment. From the command center, Haddon and Jenkins kept watch of the whole operation. There were hundreds of ways the truck stop scenario could go wrong. With the undercover agents' lives on the line, there was no margin for error. The cocaine was divided in 2 loads. Williams escorted one. Davis followed the other. They shepherded the couriers to the edge of town, shielding them from other drug gangs and from the law.
To make it easier for our surveillance, we had one of the courier cars go to the east and one go to the west because we had 2 complete surveillance teams operating simultaneously, and we didn't want the 2 to get crossed up with each other.
The operation went off without a hitch. 6 additional cops were videotaped in the act of drug trafficking. The FBI was about to enter the last phase of Shattered Shield, arresting the corrupt cops who would kill anyone who opposed them. After the big truck stop operation, FBI agents moved quickly on the murder of Kim Groves. They searched the house of the hitman Paul Hardy. There, agents found an unauthorized copy of a guide to police codes. the same codes that Davis used when he ordered Groves' murder. Another search at the home of one of Hardy's accomplices turned up the murder weapon, a 9mm handgun. The two investigations, Shattered Shield and the murder, were closing at the same time. For the ringleaders, the FBI took no chances. Agents came to Len Davis's house the next day when he was off duty.
Look, I ain't done nothing. What are you talking about? Look, I'm a police officer, man.
The thug with a badge was arrested on federal drug charges and for the murder of Kim Groves. For Davis's partner, Sammy Williams, agents would use a different approach. Haddon wanted to flip Williams to the prosecution side.
At that point,
it worked.
And they decided, okay, let's throw another curveball and then let's bring Juan in. So they brought me into the door and I introduced myself, especially to Juan Jackson, the FBI. You could see the color leave his face. His world just came crashing down.
Sammy Williams turned government witness. His testimony would later prove crucial for getting convictions. Haddon and his team had no time to lose. Before news of Davis and Williams' arrests could spread, they had to deliver the rest of the gang to justice. Dozens of armed men in uniform.
The strategy we were to employ was to arrest Len Davis on December the 5th. And then on December the 6th, we had all of these officers appear before a federal grand jury. And then on December 7th, the grand jury ordered all these officers to come to the FBI office to give handwriting exemplars.
Len Davis's recruits arrived at the FBI's office to give handwriting samples for analysis together with 60 fellow officers. Since the drug ring involved no written records, and so many officers provided writing samples, the crooked cops suspected nothing. Like the others before it, the FBI's ruse worked. One by one, more than a dozen dirty cops of New Orleans were arrested.
That was a safe way to do it because obviously all of these officers were armed and they were facing very serious charges, and that was a way to do it to avoid any potential for any bloodshed or any unwanted resistance by the officers.
In court, the FBI's recordings built a solid case against the officers.
are you aware we have hours and
The videos and audio tapes spoke louder than the code words and erased all doubts that jurors might have had. Agent Karen Jenkins knew the evidence was strong.
The jury was able to hear for themselves what the officer said. They were able to see for themselves what they were doing because of the videos that we had.
That wasn't me. It could have been anybody.
As prosecutor Al Winters had predicted early in the investigation, Davis tried to talk his way out of it.
All police officers know what that is. It's a homicide.
Even after all the safeguards we took, Davis's defense at the trial was that he was conducting his own undercover operation, that it was not really done according to the book, but, you know, he was a poor cop and didn't have a lot of training, but he was trying to conduct his own undercover operation.
Davis never admitted any wrongdoing. He didn't need to. The audio and videotape spoke for themselves. Faced with the prospect of convicting those sworn to protect them, the citizens of the jury listened intently.
The tapes were chilling, and as those tapes were played, the courtroom was as silent as a cathedral.
Has the jury reached a verdict?
Yes, Your Honor, we have.
Will the defendant please stand?
The jury deliberated just 15 minutes.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree and hereby sentence the defendant.
Len Davis was sentenced to death for his role in Kim Groves' murder, which was later commuted to life. In 2 other trials, Davis and his co-conspirators received 18 convictions for drug trafficking. 15 officers were headed for prison. Because he cooperated with prosecutors, Sammy Williams was sentenced to just 5 years. He would never again wear a badge.
You have irrevocably stained that uniform you once wore. But I must reluctantly recognize that other crimes can only be solved with cooperation of people like you. Court dismissed.
For the Big Easy, Haddon's case brought a long, hard look in the mirror.
You know, I think that the city of New Orleans has been very tolerant of all sorts of conduct which might be considered improper in other parts of the country. It's part of the culture here, and I'm a Louisiana native. But I think this was a wake-up call to the citizens of New Orleans that there was a serious problem within the NOPD, and that problem had to be addressed.
You know, you take an oath, and I think that when you do that, there's no excuse for anything else. I think we helped. I think that now their focus is different. I think hiring, I think pay scale, I think everything about what the New Orleans Police Department is about is different.
Under Chief Pennington, the New Orleans Police Department revamped its practices and fired more rogue cops. The Big Easy had cleaned house. The department and the FBI continue to work together to bring justice to the city's streets.